Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're joining us from. My name is Luma Al-Shibib. I am an insurance coverage lawyer on behalf of policyholders at a law firm in New York City called Anderson Kill. And in that capacity, I co-chair the firm's cyber insurance recovery practice. Welcome to this panel discussion today on legal careers in cybersecurity, privacy, and AI. This is an informational session meant to highlight legal careers in cyber and related fields and provide some insight and tips into how you can get into this field and what the practice looks like on a day-to-day basis. As a reminder, this is a non-CLE session. We have 3 experienced lawyers who are experts in this field who have agreed to be our panelists today, and I will be moderating the discussion. I'm going to ask the panelists in a moment to introduce themselves, but before we begin, I did want to mention that this panel is being co-sponsored by the ABA TIPS Cybersecurity and Privacy Committee, as well as the Public Sector Lawyers Division. So thank you to both committees for their sponsorship. And I also want to take a moment to thank ABA programming staff who have worked hard to put this program together. Thank you all. Now, shameless plug, I am a member of the TIPS Cybersecurity Committee. I've been a member for a few years now, and I found it to be extremely informative. And if you are interested in pursuing a career in this field, I strongly encourage you to consider joining the committee. Meetings are held on a monthly basis via Zoom, and I believe almost at every meeting, there's a speaker that comes in, either from outside the committee or a member of the committee that puts on a presentation about a hot topic or a trending issue. And I have learned a lot from those meetings. I find them to be very valuable. At the end of our discussion today, we will have a slide with the committee website information. So if you are interested, I encourage you to check that out. One other thing before we begin, I will be asking the panelists questions, but if you have any questions, then I encourage you to write those in the chat and we will do our best to address those in real time. So with that, let's begin. Let's meet our panelists. Robert, Cynthia, and Dan, welcome and thank you for lending your time to discuss these issues with us. Can you please introduce yourselves and very briefly just explain what it is you do now, your current positions, how they involve cybersecurity, privacy, and AI. And with that, why don't we start with Robert?
It's great to be here. Thank you everyone for joining. I hear that we have a large number of people that are attending. We can't see you, but hey, it's great that you're out there. So I lead the cybersecurity and technology solutions legal team at Brown & Brown Insurance. Brown & Brown Insurance is an insurance brokerage that has about 17,000 employees. We're global around the world with offices in various locations. And as part of what I do, I support the Chief Information Security Officer, the Chief Information Officer, and the Chief Security Officer with reviewing contracts on a daily basis when we're dealing with third and fourth party vendors to deal with privacy and security. I assist with compliance issues because every day it seems like there's a new regulation or law that deals with privacy or security on a global level. So we're always navigating the new laws and trying to remain in compliance. I am the lead for incident response for cybersecurity incidents. So we're talking anything from insider threats to ransomware. I lead the response when dealing with those issues on a global level. And then something that's fairly new that I am dealing with is artificial intelligence, and how do we comply with the various laws that are out there. AI is a big topic. It's supposed to provide a competitive edge, but we need to make sure that we're doing it responsibly. And I am charged with leading that issue and discussions around the company. So that's what I do in a nutshell.
That's a huge portfolio. How do you have time to sleep?
Very
All
little.
right. Yeah. So yeah, that's really interesting. And I definitely want us to talk about AI and how that's changing the landscape. Cynthia, why don't you introduce yourself, please? And your
Hi, I'm Cindy. I'm Cindy Stamer. I have worked and come up through this field because of my practice. I'm a board certified labor and employment law, a fellow in the American College of Employee Benefits Council. And what I do with my days is I help insurance, healthcare, employee benefits, and other data and performance sensitive people, a lot of people with sentencing guidelines and other types of things, defense people, etc., deal with the management of their people, processes, and data. So I've had a lot of experience and oftentimes work on cyber. I also have the distinction of having worked on the laws like HIPAA, and I have been the Joint Committee on Employee Benefits representative, or what we call scribe, that organizes the annual meeting for the JCEB with the Office of Civil Rights. And as with my regulatory affairs practice, have for more than 30 years worked on data and other issues in terms of privacy breach and other concerns.
Great, thank you so much. Dan, please, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure, thank you, Luma. Dan Cotter, I'm a partner at Dickinson, Wright PLLC in Chicago. If you look me up, I'm labeled as a technology and regulatory attorney. And the reason for that is that I spent 16 years of my career in-house at insurance companies dealing with privacy issues. I was the first chief privacy officer of several organizations. As Cindy talked about, dealing with HIPAA back in the late 90s, dealing with the EU directive on privacy before GDPR was around, and dealing with Graham Leach Bliley as it came into effect, and advising clients on that. And a large part of my practice is things like Robert had talked about, and Cindy as well. A large part of my privacy and cyber and AI practice now as well is being proactive with clients to try to make sure that they've got in place internal policies and procedures and external expectations and disclosures that match what they're actually doing with data. We spend a lot of time with clients talking to them about kind of the data mapping and what data they're actually collecting and why, because a lot of companies, including insurers, but my other clients as well, collect all kinds of information that they think somehow gives them a competitive edge in terms of pricing, in terms of customer relations, but they haven't really thought through all of the expanding privacy rules that exist in the state level. Really, at the federal level, there's no oversight. So that's my practice. And on the insurance side, I advise insurance clients with respect to policy wording, with respect to issues that arise under their cyber policies and things of that nature.
Dan, if you don't mind, I'll stick with you for a second because you started to touch on your history, and I was wondering, how did you all get into cybersecurity, privacy, AI, doing what you are doing today? How did that evolve?
Sure, it was in some ways it was an accidental issue. When I graduated, I went to law school at night. I worked at CNA Financial by day as an accountant and paralegal. I left and went to a large, primarily insurance defense firm. My colleagues and I were starting to follow back in the late 90s a guy named Peter DeJager, who was the kind of Chicken Little of Y2K back in the days when there were still listservs on Yahoo and other convening. And I was invited to come back to CNA Financial in a non-litigation role. And my second day on the job, I went into my boss's office and said, "Hey, I've been doing some writing on this and Mealy's and some other publications. What's going on with Y2K?" And we called down to IT. They said, "We'll send somebody up tomorrow." And so I got assigned to be the Y2K general counsel. for CNA Financial, overseeing a $65 million program as a second-year attorney, advising the board of directors and the C-suite on every day what was happening, making sure that we were compliant, meeting with clients like Motorola that were very concerned about their risk and exposure for non-compliance and ships that might fail. For those that are young on this line, that was a 3-year, probably the only time in history that the IT departments got exactly what they wanted in terms of cost and spend, and convinced people that they could reinvent IT. And so that just expanded. So then CNA was looking at e-commerce, and because I was in tech and doing a lot of review of all the contracts and making sure that we were compliant with Y2K, became e-commerce general counsel, and became the first chief privacy officer of CNA Financial, and oversaw the first audit of states as Gramm-Leach-Bliley came into effect in early 2000, and did that for the next 13 years or whatever. And so that's kind of the history. And when I've been, and I was telling Luma before, I spent 13 and a half years in-house in that environment at large insurance companies, went back in private practice for 3 years, then back to an insurance company for 2.5 years. And at that latter one, we dealt with a lot of TCPA issues, a lot of canned spam issues, a lot of privacy issues, and the kind of alphabet soup of regulatory issues that came out. So, and finally, before I stopped squawking, at CNA Financial, back in the late 90s, believe it or not, the internet was a fairly new thing. And so one of the things that we had to do was develop disclaimers. And so I developed the disclaimers that CNA used for many years and tweaked over the years. But that's one of the things I did as well. And so it just kind of expanded from this interest in Y2K and advising people about the electrical grid and other things that were perceived to be in danger, but turned out to be A-okay.
Yeah, wow, that's really interesting. You really got in at the ground level.
I did, yeah.
Yeah, and I imagine for people interested in breaking into the field today, it's different because there are so many issues, but there are also so many areas where they could try to specialize or focus on. Cynthia, can you tell us how your career evolved into what it is today?
Well, I think to start with, I had a background both with data from being in research in graduate school and a background in public policy. I was an NDT debater in high school and college, which means basically varsity college debate. And so when I came into adulthood and even before practice, I was dealing with government affairs and what should be the laws and the rules. And particularly in the areas of insurance, employee benefits, and workforce, technology, these kinds of things. I worked with AI in graduate school when I was at Arizona State
Wow.
a very long time ago. In fact, the systems that I used are the predecessor versions of some of the software and processes that people like the Department of Health and Human Services use to sort of decide what they're going to target for healthcare fraud. I worked on things like jury studies and the national election studies. So anyway, I had a background in data and technology. I'm a process-oriented person. And so I was never really interested in litigation. I was really interested in operations and how you made the people and process. Sometimes across my career, primarily with most of my clients are healthcare, health insurance. But early in my career, also, I did a lot of work with people like Department of Defense. And so early on, that was very important. I worked on some very interesting things about how you tracked things and put tracking mechanisms on so you could tell not only who accessed things, but who touched it, sort of tracing, and worked on some of the early legislations processes for that. I also, because I'm a process lawyer and come out of a family with healthcare and insurance background, I also very early on in the development of HRIS and health IT and health insurance systems. I do a lot of work on designing processes for investigations, claims, etc. And so inherently with all of those things, this is not, I want to be a cyber lawyer. This is, I have to understand these things. And also because I'd been doing them and working on them as the regulators and the Congress worked on them, I got invited to provide input on a lot of those things. So I've worked with the Secret Service, the FBI, the FTC, the FCC, Congress, OCR, HIPAA, and a whole host of other people on those issues. And I've done everything from and do everything from working on the regulatory guidelines to helping people operationalize systems and compliance, to investigations, to rehardening, to board training, to working on the insurance, to trying, for example, right now for the last several years, we've been working on trying to see if we can get some sort of federal cyber terrorism type of policy in place to provide backup for some of the losses and some other reforms like that, and a host of things in between. And so I say I'm an ops counsel and regulatory affairs counsel in industries where this has always been an imperative. And so you can't do what I do unless you know how the systems work and to control the data, because the data is 1/3 of the process. Money, people, and data is what make these companies make or break.
That's really, really interesting. And I think you make a great point when you say you didn't set out to be a cybersecurity lawyer, but you have to know this stuff in what you do. And, you know, there are many ways you can pursue a career that touches on these issues without necessarily saying, I want to be you know, a cybersecurity lawyer or a privacy lawyer. So that's great. Robert, before we go to you, I see there's a question, but a Q&A. I cannot access it. Jean, I don't know if you're able to access it, but if someone has a question, if they could put it in the chat, then we can see it.
I'm able to open it. It says, any suggestions for those who are just starting a career path? And I mean, I can, my advice would be, I always tell young lawyers, whatever their interests are, to think of having a quiver on your back and grabbing as many arrows as you can. And like Cindy and Robert and myself, I think if you heard our kind of where we got, how we got there, the reality is that we entered a piece, or we had a need for a certain piece of this kind of arena. And so one way to become involved is to engage in conversations around privacy and cyber and AI, whatever one of the or all of those that you're interested in. Get on LinkedIn and look for thought leaders in that space. Look for publications that are plentiful about the topics, and then become a subject matter expert. And you know, one of the things we're going to cover here is, and Luma already alluded to it, is it's a different field from 30 years ago. But in many ways, it was very similar in those days, because a couple of things. One is that the ability to research things online was not as robust as it is today. Graham Leach-Bliley, for example, anybody that knows about the insurance industry, all 50 states kind of have their own flavors of different things that they kind of set forth in their own policies and procedures. There's model privacy laws and all kinds of things. So become familiar with those things. And what I tell people is that this is one of those areas where there's a lot of arrows to be picked up, because it's an ever evolving thing. The new thing that's been in Colorado and California, for example, in recent months has been neural signals and biometric information that can tell your kind of heart rate and stuff when you're on certain sites, and like dating sites, but other things as well. Oregon has a health device law that's particular. And so there's a lot of field here. And I think in this artificial intelligence arena, I think it presents the biggest kind of opportunity, because it kind of brings together these issues of cyber and ransom and all the other things, along with privacy, deep fakes. And so there's a lot of room.
And it's evolving.
Yeah, it's evolving.
Developing.
Yeah.
Get in on the ground with that.
Right.
Well, I would just mention one thing before you let Robert talk, and it's one of the most fundamental things, and I've practiced it since I was in law school, and that is get involved in the relevant ABA committees and across different sections. And so, Luma, I'm going to anticipate your plug. As you know, I have been involved in the cyber committee here, as well as in the intellectual property section and other sections. And the TIP cyber committee absolutely rocks. And if you hang out in that committee and listen and just jump in with 2 feet, you'll know both what's happening and make great relationships and get great mentorship, have an opportunity to develop not only thought leadership, but publish, speak, and do these other things. So to me, number one is to start knowing which of those things, if you want to be a cyber lawyer rather than somebody selling cybersecurity or a technology person who has a law degree, which can be a fine thing. Absolutely, you need to register and get involved in the relevant ABA committees.
Yeah, absolutely. Robert, can you tell us about your evolution?
Sure. So I'm the first in my family to go to law school. I knew nothing about law school, didn't know what to expect. And I thought I was going to be a trial attorney, and realized that to be a trial attorney, you had to do criminal work. And then I looked at how much public defenders and prosecutors get paid, and I said, I can't do that. And I got a job at a regional law firm, fairly large law firm, and they were paying me almost triple what the public defenders was going to pay me. So I took that job, still not knowing what I was going to do. Did not become a trial attorney because 99% of cases, civil cases, don't go to trial. So I ended up in litigation. And as it turned out, about 2012, 2013, one of our partners, he was trying to redevelop or retool his practice, and he did a Google search and said, what will be the top issues in the next 10 years?
Wow.
And cybersecurity came up. And I said, wow, that sounds really cool. How do I get into that? Had no clue, right? And I was told, and this kind of goes to the question of how do you get involved in this? I was told if you want to get involved or become the thought leader on a practice, you need to read a lot, go to conferences, and write. And I just took that word for word. So I went to conferences, sometimes on my own dollar, and sat down and learned a lot. And then I started writing articles. And one of the issues that came up was you can write, but where do you get a chance to publish your stuff? That's where the ABA came in, because the ABA is always looking for content. So I was able to write for the ABA and develop content. And then I started my own blog because I wanted to have a platform to write what I wanted to write about instead of what the ABA or Thomson Reuters. So I started my own blog and started writing about these issues and getting out there and shaking hands and learning a lot. So yeah, one thing led to the next, and the law firm said, all right, Robert is now our cybersecurity and privacy guy because he's writing about this, he's going to conferences. So as clients came in and they said, hey, you know, we have a cybersecurity issue, they would go, speak to Robert. He's our guy. And then I realized as I was getting involved in litigation cases that cybersecurity technicians, the tech side, they speak a certain way. And attorneys and cybersecurity people don't always, they speak past each other or over each other's heads. So I went to the local college and did a course in forensics. And one course led to another course and to another course. And my advisor at school said, you know, if you continue, you'll have a master's in cybersecurity. And that's what I did. I ended up getting a master's in cybersecurity because I wanted to be able to speak the language of cybersecurity experts. So yeah, so my journey was intentional. It was accidental in that if it wasn't for the partner saying, what's going to be the next, what the big topic in the next 10 years? And I was in the room and he said, it's going to be cybersecurity and cyber. And I said, I want to do that. And then I took it upon myself to learn about it, write about it, and here I am today.
Wow, that you said so many good nuggets for law students or new attorneys who are listening. I have a first-year associate at my firm who's very interested in AI. And I told her, you can be the AI person. No one here knows that. Just start writing about it and researching. And everything you said is 100% accurate. You learn it on your own if you have to. You write about it. You publish at your firm with the ABA. I believe law students can publish with the ABA. I think that was a question that we had. And yeah, you go out, you meet people, you join committees. A lot is on Zoom. You can get to know people, and then you go to an annual meeting, you meet them in person. So these are those were all great pieces of advice, and also a really interesting story about it sort of happening organically, but with intention.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And a shameless plug for the TIP cybersecurity.
Yes,
I'm becoming
exactly.
chair in August. Robert's a past chair. And if you're interested in getting involved in writing, including for the newsletter, shoot me a note and we'll get you involved in that committee, because we're always looking for people that are interested in writing. And the other thing that, like Robert's thing with sitting down with a partner and talking like that is, I think that you can find opportunities to co-write with people that are more senior. You can reach out to folks, and oftentimes, folks like myself are willing to work with people to produce something that's, can be, at least you get some credit for that. And so, yeah, it's, and like Robert said, and Luma reiterated, a lot of it again is you have to invest in yourself in terms of these things. So again, if you're at a firm or you're in law school and trying to figure out your job, you may not be a cyber and privacy attorney. There's not necessarily, depend on the firm, a lot of roles right now at some firms, but you can kind of on the side kind of do this. And like Luma talked about, the young associate, be the person that initiates the conversation and goes to the senior people in the firm and says, I've got this interest in doing this. Is it okay if I at least do some of that? Because for firms, selfishly, it enhances the portfolio of what they can offer on the menu of services to their existing and future clients.
There was a question from someone about who's transitioning into the law from a different career, and they already have experience in cybersecurity, but don't necessarily want to start as an entry-level lawyer. Do you?
Yeah.
Mention
Yeah.
if I think about that coming out of a large firm or otherwise, weird light just came in. The first thing is there's many different ways to use your law degree. And I actually have, I also have a family background being people in technology and industrial engineering. My kid's dad was one of the lead design engineers for the secure communications on Air Force One, for example. So it helps if you have those backgrounds, and you probably will get recruited to different things. So you might end up in cyber, you might become a CISO, you might become a general counsel, you might become a lawyer in these areas. But one thing you probably should expect, and it becomes a challenge for people that come out of a career and come to the practice law, and Robert can probably perhaps speak to this, and Daniel as well, is that when you come to law firms, they generally don't credit your time as a non-lawyer as time equivalent to not being entry level. So the expectation that you're going to get to leg up from and skip over being an entry level lawyer because you had a career somewhere else is probably unrealistic, but it's not worthless. And I want you to recognize that if you do the other things that we've been talking about investing in your career, this is another investment you've made. And the difference is that background is going to be something that's going to open up doors for you, because you will have business or other experience relevant to what you do that will make it more likely that you'll have the opportunity to work in cyber, and that you will get the juiciest projects in cyber. And if you continue to drive yourself and develop yourself that way, you'll probably meet your career and have a lot of goals like you want, but you're not going to get to come in as a second or third year lawyer or with extra pay. And in fact, if you look at sort of the high levels of all of us have discussed, I think all of us came with some background in some business respects. I grew up in healthcare and insurance. I've lived in technology. I've run data labs. And so my interest actually gravitated to it, even though I've been practicing law before people even had the phrase cyber lawyer. I was doing it 30 years ago, 35 years ago, and doing investigations and building systems on it. So use that skill and recognize it. But I would caution you that pushing for you to not be a first-year lawyer when you're a first-year lawyer. You're a first-year lawyer with some unique experience that gets you to drive your career more likely in the direction you want to go.
I second all that, and you know, my first career was in accounting, and I probably should have mentioned that as well, because I was became an expert on macros, and I was the first person at CNA Financial to be able to parse data from the mainframe to a PC and automate it. Pretty crude but simple artificial intelligence back in the day, creating long memos and things for the CFO. But I agree with all that Cindy said. I think that the one area or arena where you might potentially be able to leverage some of that experience would be an alternative path, and would be the big four accounting firms. They do a lot of cyber and different types of implementations and things. And there, because attorneys don't really get separated, although KPMG is trying to become a non-attorney owned in Arizona. But some of those may give you some credit. And so if you were going to like a PwC or a KPMG and their privacy and cyber support services, whatever their label, whatever they title it, it would not necessarily be law related, but it would be, you might have some room there with your experience, because they look at kind of the overall package of who's coming in. And so that's one potential. But I agree with Cindy. There's, you know, and I thought the same thing. You know, I was, you know, I had worked for 6.5 years, and, you know, in business and stuff. And again, it didn't mean anything directly, but it meant a world in terms of that experience and bringing it, like Cindy said, Robert and Cindy and myself, we all brought business and different pieces already to our practice of law. And it definitely differentiates you in terms of kind of setting you up for success, because you've got that experience and you've got that knowledge that will then differentiate you long-term, but not upfront.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I mean, you still have to learn how to be a lawyer, right? And that's the training you get. But that business experience and being able to talk to your clients who are business people and have that experience it is valuable, and you're coming in with that leg up. Robert, do you need specialized degrees or cybersecurity certifications to do this?
I really don't think so, even though there are certifications out there. And I think a lot of those help you get in the door, and it helps also with, as I say, speaking the lingo. But I have met many cybersecurity privacy attorneys that don't have a specialized degree. But the question then becomes, how do you prove to clients or others that you know what you're talking about, right? And that's probably where the certifications help out. So it's not necessary, but it's helpful in my opinion.
Is one more valuable than the
You
other?
know, I don't think so. I can tell you this. The AAIP, the International Privacy Association, I was certified there for a long time, and I had that certification. That meant a lot in the privacy space, not so much in the security space, right? When I got my master's in cybersecurity, that opened the eyes to other cybersecurity professionals who were like, okay, you know what you're talking about. But in the law firm, it was like, what does that have to do with the law, right? So it's it depends on where you are and who you're talking to. I think in terms of looking at a resume, if someone's hiring you, it's helpful, I believe. But again, I don't know if one is more important than the other. It just depends on where you are.
Yeah, and I guess it depends what you do. If you're a breach response, it may be more important than what I do, which is insurance coverage, and I only need to be somewhat conversant in the lingo.
Right.
If I could add I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Cynthia.
If I could add a clarification too, I remember when I was taking on my tax classes, my tax professor said something to me that I'm going to modify here. There's a difference between being the CISSP or the CISO or the Chief Privacy Officer and being the lawyer that represents them. We have very distinctive roles. And that role is important, if for nothing else, for attorney-client privilege. And so the fact that you understand the fundamentals of process and issues and risk that your client deals with is very helpful. But if you want to get a CISSP, which is one of the certifications that a lot of my clients have, which is a cybersecurity, you go to, if you're involved with ISSA, RIA, those are people that are wanting to grow up to be CISOs or are CISOs. Then that's somebody that's actually going to be setting up systems and doing or overseeing the systems itself. As a lawyer, you're doing something differently. You're not necessarily the doer. You're the person that helps to specify what the processes are, helps guide them through the process of trying to establish a process for defensibility and risk management and recoverability. When you're looking for coverage, you're looking at something else. And so when you look at your certifications, I look at those as things just like some of the many articles and things that all of us have written and some of the different things that gives us ability to understand and communicate better, to understand where the law may have trouble meeting reality, things like that. But if you want to do the law, you should focus on the things like, and Robert's comments made me think of that, you should focus on the skills as a lawyer, things like understanding the federal sentencing guidelines and all the different laws and understanding how data happens and what records it makes and what it doesn't and how you can monitor for ins and outs and these different things, because that helps you be better at it. But if you want to be a cybersecurity lawyer rather than a CISO or a cybersecurity technology person or a forensic person or these other things, you're going to pick different kinds of training. All are valuable, but what training you get will shape what's relevant for the training, and it will also shape what opportunities you get, because going out and spending all these times on these certifications to learn how you pick security and implement it is probably not going to substantially increase your value as a cybersecurity lawyer.
I have two questions that are somewhat the same. What are some emerging cybersecurity issues that you think will come to the forefront in the next few years? And then the related question is, how do you think the practice of cybersecurity, privacy, and AI is going to evolve in the next few years? And I ask this because if you're looking to get into the field, from you guys as the experts, where you see it going, this may give those people some insight into, what they want to look into or what they want to focus on in terms of pursuing their options. Dan, do you want to start?
Sure. I mean, I think one of the big things that's evolved and has changed, and we'll see if the current administration continues it, is during the Biden administration, a number of cyber state actors were added to the Office of Foreign Asset Control, especially designated nationals list for some of the big breaches and ransomware attacks that have occurred. The FBI and Treasury and other departments were very clear, and it's reflected in a lot of the insurance bulletins that ransomware is not to be something to be engaged in with bad actors. CNA Financial, where I worked for many years, still has the biggest settlement for cybersecurity ransom. And when you talk to CEOs and executives at companies that face these ransomware attacks, the reality is they got really a Hobson's choice. They can either pay the ransomware and continue in their business, or they can be crippled for a substantial amount of time. So I think one of the things to keep an eye on, I think, for folks, and Cindy talked about the sentencing guidelines and other things, I think there's going to be a real focus on kind of cyber crimes, and especially, again, with Ukraine and Russia potentially resolving their dispute. Who knows what we see from there? Both of those nations were for many years. Some of the bigger attackers and causes of a lot of ransomware attacks. So that will be interesting. But that's something I think that's out there. I think that again, some of the policies and procedures and orders and things that have happened in the last month could again dictate some of these things. For example, again, the Biden administration had an artificial intelligence executive order that put guardrails in for especially governmental actors, and one of the first items that was overturned or rescinded was that with the executive order that says we're going full bore to be the market leader in artificial intelligence. So I think there's going to be a lot of things kind of in this arena, and like I said, OFAC. It'll be interesting to see what that looks like with ransomware and other kinds of arenas. I think that we'll see continued, ransomware attacks. I think again, these three buckets are kind of conjoined, or there's a Venn diagram, but as Robert said, the certifications for privacy is one thing. It's the protection of data and figuring out how we exist with our consumers and with everybody else, and what kind of ramifications there are. Cyber's the kind of the arena of both the insurance aspects of it, but also just kind of the how do we protect against these attacks and having our information everywhere. And then artificial intelligence, I think, is really, again, I think it's just fascinating to me. I think we were talking before this started. There's a lot of emphasis in the legal arena in recent weeks, again, because there's been a whole host of cases where attorneys have been found to file cases that don't exist. There's the whole issue to me of the reality is with our supervisory requirements, model rules of professional conduct, with competence, with confidentiality, we have all kinds of, and being candid with the court, we have all kinds of obligations that exist for lawyers to make sure that what they're filing is accurate. But I think the scary part is the deep fake aspects. There's on the ABA's cybersecurity task force, there have been references to somebody who was on a call like this where there were 5 other people on, and all of those were deep fakes. They were not real people, and this person invested $250,000 or $500,000 with each of them because they all talked about the environment. And I start to think about that because I sometimes get from some of these websites invites to look at things that are tangential to the law, and they're asking for investments. And then I always think, is this legit? And so I think for someone that's starting out, I think it's mind blowing what think about artificial intelligence and ChatGPT. It's been 2 or 3 years now, and each iteration gets better and better. So again, I think there's a lot of room for those that are just trying to figure this out of how we monitor this stuff, how we keep on track of it, and how we advise our clients in this ever-changing environment of how to be both proactive but also reactive and be able to allow them to sleep at night with all this stuff going on.
Yeah. And now in terms of deep fakes, just from my perspective with regards to insurance coverage, fraudulent wire transfers, a wire transfer, you have to verify that right now via phone call. But if you get on, say, with your CFO on a Zoom to verify it and it's a deep fake, could you imagine the repercussions of that? And I think it's already happening.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's been happening for decades. People just don't realize it. When I was working with the Secret Service in the Bush administration, my kids, they were making copies of money, and they were talking about fakes of individual and people, and even back then, and my kids just turned 30 last week. So I think what's happening is that it's coming to the forefront. AI, identity theft, cybercrime, those things have been going on my entire career, and I'm old. But the thing that's changing is the rapid advancement of big data, the digitization of all aspects of business for the efficiency, and the changing technology has caused an explosion in both the opportunity to use it for good and for bad. And so I think the Trump administration's, there's a lot of opportunity to get involved right now on commenting and other sorts of things, simply because there's going to be this massive growth and regulation. And alongside the enthusiasm, remember, Elon Musk is the guy that said we need responsible AI, not just AI. So we'll see how responsible it becomes. And some of that has to do with how much those of us participate in it. But one of the things I was going to say is, if you want to know where AI is going, follow the data and the systems. If you want to know where cyber's going, follow the data systems. And I think that everyone that wants to be involved in this as a career should look at that with great excitement and enthusiasm. I'm a process lawyer. I help people take their data and their people and try to make them do what they're supposed to do not do what they're not supposed to do it in a way we can defend, and then defend people when the sky is falling and try to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. I do that over and over again. It might be different if I'm working in the retail space, the construction space, the airline industry, healthcare, different aspects of healthcare, different aspects of insurance. If you're interested in insurance, the NAIC certainly has some great things that have been looking on for the last 10 years or so. When Robert's looking at healthcare systems versus claims and property liability or cyber liability, there's different data, there's different processes. On AI, concerns we're having in employment and underwriting is that we don't yet let AI mimic processes, and we don't know it, that are prohibited processes. Every aspect of the career that you use will be involved with systems and data at some level. If there's an industry that you have particular knowledge or particular things you like about, just start learning or asking about it, and follow the data and follow the systems, and then follow the ins and follow the outs, and find out which rules and constructs and regulators and standards apply to them. What you'll find is the core things that are probably making your head spin, like the laws that Daniel was talking about, or the standards, whether you're using EU, GDPR, NIST. What you'll find is good data practices and good security practices have a shared architecture. And it grows with it. And so what you want to get is the fundamentals of it, but how you get the fundamentals and where you start, which industry, which data, doesn't really matter. If you get started and you self-drive, you'll have the opportunity to get there.
That's great advice. And especially in terms of the fundamentals. The rules and the regulations are so different though, and they're in flux and they're changing. And, even with the change of administrations, right? So, Robert, how do you stay current on whatever rules apply to what you're doing? Because there are so many, and even if fundamentally they may have a common theme, there are differences there.
So I will tell you, every morning I read various newsletters to keep up to date with what's going on. So there's a blog in AI that kind of consolidates all the different issues of AI that I'm keeping on top of. I read the Wall Street Journal's cybersecurity. They have a special publication on cybersecurity. There's a CSO magazine that I read every morning. There's a CIO magazine I read every morning. So because the laws are changing so rapidly, it's on me to try and stay up to date with what's going on. And I rely heavily on outside counsel to send me what's going on and what's changing, right? And I'm doing this on a global level. So I'm relying on outside counsel from around the world to try and keep me up to date. And then I have to filter and go, okay, what's important and what's urgent, right? What do I need to fix today versus what's going to be a long-term project? So I guess what I'm trying to say is continuously reading and learning. That's what's so cool about cybersecurity and cyber law in general, because when I talk about cyber law, I'm talking about anything that deals with, in my view, the internet, which is almost everything. Everything is being digitized, and our reliance on cyber is becoming, for example, if my internet went down right now, I couldn't work, right? So our reliance on cyber is just so incredibly serious, and that's part of warfare and everything else. So when I'm talking about cyber, it's really intriguing because it's not boring. It's just so not boring. Every day I'm fascinated by what's going on. And I think, going back to your previous question, there will be a point in time where it will not be cyber crime or cyber insurance or cyber this. It'll just be crime and insurance, because it'll be so ubiquitous that we won't even think there's a difference between cyber versus physical. It'll just be a part of our life. But yeah, continuously learning and reading, that's a big part of my job, so that I can advise my stakeholders what's going on.
Well, and what are the biggest challenges of working in this field?
It's always changing. I mean, you know, to Sydney's point, I mean, some things have never changed. She's been doing this for 30 years. Some things have not changed, the fundamentals. But I find that there is a gap in learning between the C-suite and the younger generation coming up. Some of us, I mean, my kids are born with Snapchat. They're born with a phone in their hand, versus the leadership sometimes don't understand it. So there is a gap in learning, but also because we're moving so fast, and AI is pushing us to another level. What's so fascinating about it is also what's so challenging about it, is that it's growing so much and it's moving so fast. So if you want I think this is a high-paced profession. Some may think differently, but because of what's going on in the world, I think it's high-paced. So it's a challenge, and that makes it fascinating, and it's not boring.
Cynthia, do you agree in terms of?
Yeah, I would love to compare my reading list. I read or skim through about 1,000 daily feeds of regulatory and legal developments and technology developments, and sometimes more a day that I just skim through. I put out probably 30 alerts. I publish every day. And I practice law, you know, so, but what I love about what I do, first of all, to Robert's point, it's really is just crime or abuse, whether it's, you know, employees hacking in to find out who's going to be laid off first, or which is how I came into these things, is what do people do with our systems and responding to it. And it is really just crime or other risks or abuses that come up with data. And it doesn't always involve crime. Sometimes, you know, one of my clients is a third-party administrator. They're experiencing problems with their VPN. It's just a technology problem, but they have deadlines and they're having trouble with their VPN and their operating system, and it's slowing or shutting down or whatever. That's a problem. And so what I think staying abreast is, if for somebody who has found out a way to get paid, basically being a problem solver and a learner, it's much better than being a college professor. But I read, you know, like a gerbil on steroids, and I talk to people, and I get to learn not only the fundamentals, but the fun of this stuff is learning what they do, what their data is, what their system is, how they want to use it, and then helping them figure out how to do it and make it defensible and continually work. And if you like to play house in everybody else's business, this is an extraordinary place. It is one of the fastest and most exciting and challenging places to be. And it never stays the same, because every day there's an upgrade, a new threat, a new system change, a new thing they want to do with it, somebody new coming in or coming out, a new interface. All roads lead to somewhere, and those are my favorite kinds of things. And finally, it's going to always be important, and it's going to grow more important, because government and business have bought into it, even with its risk. The problem is they bought into it and their risk concern dropped. It became so normalized when the government started digitizing everything that now even when the business don't want to, they're required to do that. And just like AI, there's this great enthusiasm to roll it out, but they roll it out without really understanding. And
Yeah.
so if you think about me, I just point this out. When we started my system, and part of what got me involved is I work on the system. I have my own operating system that was a joint venture with some of the biggest technology leaders because they were interested in the way I think. And we test what we do in general before we roll out a new feature for a year in a private workforce. And I'm a law firm of one. So somebody goes and plays with new technology for a year before I get to play with it.
Wow.
Today, people are saying, download your chat GTP. What is that? AI, Microsoft 3 Copilot, AI, whatever. And they're going, oh, you can't use that feature for another year. But the people I know, planes crash, hacking happens, and my system has to meet that integrity. So the other part of that I would just say is don't forget, you have to be a cyber lawyer yourself. The cobbler has to have shoes or you too can get indicted.
That's great advice. Great advice. So we have about 5 minutes left. Dan, what advice or practical tips do you have for new lawyers or experienced attorneys who are looking to break into this field or transition into it?
Again, in a lot of cases, for experienced attorneys, the reality is that you're probably touching on some privacy in cyber. If you, for example, do M&A or you do tech contracts or you do any commercial lease, because there are cyber insurance requirements. There are all kinds of pieces to this. If you're in litigation, for sure, again, the reality is we've gone to e-discovery, and so you're already kind of involved in the tech space. So the other thing is again, if you listen to everything we've said today, it's a great environment. I think part of it is that there's not a lot of written law or black and white law necessarily in a lot of arenas, and that could be on cyber coverages. And in Illinois, for example, there's been a big debate about various endorsements and whether there's insurance coverage for Biometric Information Privacy Act and other things. So there's a lot of room to explore. But it's the age-old question of how do you eat an elephant, and it's one bite at a time. So pick something in this broad arena. You can't be probably the jack of all trades right away, unless that one person who's got extensive experience, at various agencies and stuff. But pick a lane, pick something that you want to focus on and learn about that and become an expert on that, and then kind of add to it like a jigsaw puzzle as you build out from the middle.
Yeah, great advice. Cynthia, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, first of all, I echo that. You got to start somewhere, and there's a tipping point, and you can speed up that tipping point through a lot of different ways. I want to reiterate that I drink the wine at the ABA. If you're interested in cyber, join the committees that do that. Start with TIPS Cyber Committee. It's outstanding. But there are some other committees as well. Volunteer, sign up for JCEB. TIPS is part of that, and ask to go to OCR and some of these other meetings to see how policy's made, follow those debates, participate. And I want to make one other little suggestion for you. I'm a big fan of pro bono service. And so talk to your firm and understand, when you're working on advisory boards or doing other things, but take the opportunity to volunteer for professional projects like our policy committees in the ABA or your state bar, but also consider getting involved with some volunteer activities, either in other professional associations, or maybe you help a nonprofit board review their insurance, help them do their cyber risk assessments. All of these things, anything you can do to get experience helps you to define what you want to do and helps position you to do that.
Thank you. That's great advice. We have a question. Where's a good place to start when joining the ABA Cyber Law Committee? Reading, signing up. Yeah, sign up. Exactly.
Show up and email the chair and vice chair that you want to do something.
Yep.
They will take it from there. They will not let you go.
Yeah, Robert, any last words of advice to those looking to break into the field?
I would just say go get it. I mean, you have to read, learn, write, be around the people that are in this space. It's not just going to come to you. It's a very exciting space to be in. Like I said, it's not boring, it's fascinating, but you have to go get it and be around the right people and look at the right stuff.
Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it. I enjoyed hearing everything you had to say, and I hope those attending did as well. If you have questions or want to reach out to the panelists, they have graciously provided their email addresses. And then, Jean, if we could go to the next slide, that should have the information to join the TIPS cybersecurity and data privacy, and I believe AI committee. I'm not sure if that name change has taken effect officially yet, but again, it's a great committee. I love going to the monthly meetings and hearing the discussions, and I've learned a lot. So thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciate it.
And for those still on, we're planning a 2026, our biannual cybersecurity conference. So again, if you're interested in getting involved in that, please let us know. We're just in early stages of development, where that's going to be and the topics.
Thank you, everyone.